What's up, man? Um, I hate when I start a video and I have to re-record the intro. The intro energy is the most important part. And I was thinking about doing a lot, but y'all see the view. I ain't got to do too much. I'm gonna let the view be the intro itself. Maybe I'll put a little something there for y'all. But last conversation we was having, we was talking about where do we go from here? And yesterday I posed to myself the what's up, dog? I posed to myself the question of, there's a lot of things that I said I want to do on here that I've recorded and I've told y'all. And as y'all can see, you know, they get accomplished as time goes. So I posed myself the question, you know, we want change, but we do nothing for change. And I don't think in any sense of the way that's correct. I think if you want something to change, you got to do something. And I've tried to share how do y'all do that on an interpersonal level, on a level with your friends. To if you want your friends to grow with you, you have to have those conversations. You can't sit at the bar every day and bullshit all the time. I think, and I've even had conversations with some of my friends, some of my family, like, what do you want to do with your life? At the end of the day, when it's all said and done, do you just want to be known for working at whatever building, or do you want to be known for the type of person you are? Yesterday I was actually at the bar talking about morals and values. It's something that we've talked about a lot, and you either stand for something or you fall for everything. And I see a lot of the same things, especially in America. Now that I'm in Switzerland, just so y'all know, it's very different. You see a lot of walks of life, and what we believe to be possible in the States is just very different from the rest of the world. Now, that is because, as I'm seeing these things once again, we are very different from the rest of the world. For, you know, people who won't be able to travel, people who don't think it's possible, we pretty much just stay in our own little bubble. And that gives us a certain mindset. And a couple days ago, just to put a time on this, I'm sure you guys have seen on social media the guy going, you just had to pay us enough to live, or at least pay us enough not to light the entire $1.2 million facility on fire. I think it's speaking to the state of mind of people. For someone to light $500 million in product, we're talking about paper product like diapers, toilet paper, things like that. Like, it's insane. I think that's especially one of the changes we asked for in America, is a little bit of an equal footing. We pay for everything. We pay for kids to go to school. We pay for kids to eat, live, breathe, and I get it. Taxes does do something, but at the end of the day, when are we gonna say, all right, that's enough spending all this money on the military? We have enough things going on in our personal lives that we don't really have time to worry about the bullshit that our government is doing. And not to get too political, but I just think that there's a right and there's a wrong. I don't say that I'm on any one side, because in my personal opinion, you know how I feel about them. You know what I'm saying? But I've talked about it. You can go watch the video, but that's not what this is about. This is about the belief of new possibilities. In the previous video we had with my boy Amir, hopefully that'll be out soon, we were talking about just how it's very easy to get stuck in a certain mindset, and how important it is to kind of keep yourself clear of all the debris. You know, there's no way that you're going to stop things from happening in life. There's nobody saying that. I think the problem is we sulk on that too much. We let that control us in a way, and we give these things power over us because if it happened once, that just means, it's just bound to happen again and it's going to happen forever. But when you say these things and when you kind of give up hope as far as, being able to really do something, you know, it it makes these things true in a way. So the main focus for a lot of people is going to be watch what you say. And it's the simplest way that you can start change, because when you're focusing on what you want and not what you don't want, it sounds so cliche. It sounds very like atypical. I'm sure you've heard all the gurus and all the other motherfuckers say it, but they say these things for a reason. If it wasn't a proven fact, it wouldn't be said all the time. Granted, there's a lot of disinformation and there's a lot of just confusion in the world, And once again, America especially, we are ruled by propaganda, in my viewpoint. I don't think anything I've seen on the news or on social media or heard about people from where I live and in my life, how people view the other side of the world it's jaded. It's a very closed mindset. We are worried about people pickpocketing us, but meanwhile in America you could get shot anytime. Why is that something that you're focusing on? I think it's very easy to kind of point the finger at someone else when you don't want to take accountability for the things you want to do. And accountability, don't get mad I said it, I didn't say it. Accountability, the amount of people that I see on a day-to-day basis with no accountability. Okay, yeah, maybe something happened in your life that affected your life. Now, there's people out here where it is very literally, outside of their hands and they can't do anything about it. But I'm talking about for the general public that it's more of a mentality thing for you gotta stop it. You gotta stop making excuses. Everybody doesn't need to know what you're doing. Everybody doesn't need to know your plans. And just because you meet somebody from high school doesn't mean you need to talk to them. My favorite part about being outside of school in general was I didn't have to fake anything anymore. I could really just let a motherfucker know how it is. I don't not fuck with people, but the people that wanted to be there shouldn't have, and I think even outside of school, just in general in my life, I kind of act that same way, in the way of everybody doesn't need to be around you. Just because somebody wants to kick it with you and be your friend and all that, that isn't, like, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing, but just doesn't need to be everybody. I think when your circle is too big, you mess up the quality of your circle. And you got to keep your quality is always, we've said it for years. Y'all have seen me say this for years. It's always going to be quality over quantity. I'm never going to want more of something just because it's more of it. You know what I'm saying? But if it is better in quality and it makes sense with the vision, every vision has a visionary. And if you're that visionary, you have to accept everything that comes with that. And that's what I was kind of telling people, It's when you're the one, you know what I'm saying? You're the one. We call it number one on the call sheet, for all the actors out there. Being number one on the call sheet, you may have to do a little extra. You may have to carry when you don't want to carry. But I see a lot of like motivational bullshit. Don't take this as motivation. Like, don't get me wrong. If it's something that can get you started and it's something that can, keep you determined that's what I love. You know what I'm saying? But motivation for me is like it's like a false prophet in a way. Like people think if they get motivated, that it'll be enough. You know, it's not about the motivation. I think people have a breaking point in which they can take things, and that's when they start to do the extreme instead of nipping the problem as soon as it happens. That more so is a problem than anything else. I think the fact that we still continue to allow certain things just because they're comfortable doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right way to do it. It doesn't mean it's the right way to go about doing things. And you could take that on, once again, a personal level. You can take that on a just level. You can take that on whatever level. It's a very general term. But I think a lot of people have been asking me, what do I think about my president and this, that, and the third. My viewpoint of America is very, very jaded just because I've done a lot of FBI history and all that type of research. And I understand what America was in the beginning, and things don't necessarily change. They just get older. So if you understood how they was working in the beginning, you would understand how they work now. We talk about, we get taxed so much, and once you make so much, they take so much, and this, that, and the third. But it's that way because you allow it to be that way. There's ways to get around that, and I'm not talking about tax evasion or tax fraud or anything like that, but the way things are set up that way for a reason. If you were to take advantage of these things, maybe you get a different outcome. Once again, we focus on too much the journey, not enough, too much the outcome, not enough the journey, the way we go about doing things. I'm not saying go riot and rob shit, but it's conversations we need to be had. It's one thing, like we were saying with the friends. If you want your friends around you to change, the conversation has to change. And as y'all have seen over these last couple of videos especially, we knew something like this was coming. We knew a different time was coming. We knew a change was coming. But until you actually take the steps to actually, incorporate that change to your everyday to day life, you would never know what that's going to look like until it gets there. So, but in order for that to happen, you have to move towards it. It really is. It's a lot simpler than it has to be. I think we focus too much on the past. Don't get me wrong. The past it is what it is. You can't change the past. You don't know what the future is going to hold, but you could work on what is happening in the present, and if y'all remember, I hope y'all remember, but if y'all remember, I got in an accident, in January, and it was a very, I wouldn't even say life altering. It didn't alter my life, I think, and I've been saying this, so I know at this point that it was one of those things that just pushed me forward. It was like, you've been saying you're going to take this trip, you've been saying you're going to do all these things, and you do 70% of them. But what happens when you put forth that 100, And that's a little bit of the conversation that we've been having. What's the question of the 100? Why is it easy for a lot of people to be cool with that, like 60, 70, 80 percentile, like amount of, what's the word, effort, focus? I think we get too caught up in what we think others think around us of, the perception. We talk a lot about what is better, actually being a good person or looking like a good person. care to look like a good person. I am not a nice person. I'll say that. And I say that all the time because there's a difference between nice and kind. I would call myself a very kind person. You know what I'm saying? I can be forgiving. You know what I'm saying? I can kind of be lenient. But if you think it's sweet, you think it's green light. Green light. Okay, cool. We're going to see how green it is. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's good to be like that because you draw a line. You know, when people notice you don't allow certain things, they're not going to treat you that way. And it's, once again, it's simple. You know what I noticed? You know, and this is to the generations above too. I'm talking to y'all too. I'm especially talking to y'all because the problem is, you know, y'all, I ain't gonna say we because, you know, y'all like to make it a whole generation thing. So let's make it a generation thing. You know, you sit here and you'll say, you know, we're the lazy generation and this, that, and the third, but y'all raised us off of certain moral and values, you know, that you want us to follow. But then when we see what's going on and we question it and we listen and do what you told us to do, now we're all these things. And it's very interesting because now y'all have kind of turned your back on what you said. You know, and it was once again a generational thing. Like a lot of parents in that generation just happen to say the same thing. So, and I tell my mom all the time, you know, she's always like, watch your mouth. And I tell her, if you watch an OG, I tell you, you know, you created this mouth. What you want me to do about it? You did this. I didn't do nothing about that. You know what I'm saying? And it's just one of those things where it's like you raised me on certain values and I'm following those values. So if those values happen to, you feel me, that's because I'm following it. But it's good, you know. I think we're when you kind, you got to be a little confrontational. You got to be ready to ruff some feathers, if you will. You know, I think we're too non-confrontational now. You know, somebody says something, you just kind of let it ride and think it's a joke, and everything's a joke. Everything is not a joke. You know, some jokes be rooted in truth. You know, the best jokes are rooted in truth. You know what I'm saying? If I think you look like a duck and I walk up to you like, what's up, little duckling, you know what I'm saying? It may be funny to me, but probably not so much to you because people have told you look like a duck. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just how it go, you know. My sister posted a video and she was saying, you know, a hit dog is always gonna holler. When somebody says something, you wouldn't feel a certain way about it if they weren't talking about you. You know, man, we ain't gotta say names to know things. You know, a lot of people, and I'm sure people on the other side of this screen, I may have said something that ruffled your feathers, but remember the whole, you know, purpose and point of these conversations is to ruffle feathers. You feel me? It's to wake you up, you know, raise the level of mentality, if you will, because it's a lot of sickness. It's a lot of sickness. And it's partially not our fault, but the fact that you deal with yourself every day makes it your fault. So when you look at where you are now, just remember that is because of what you were doing and what you were focused on in the previous year. So you do with that what you will. I'm gonna go back to enjoying my view. I don't know about y'all. Doses.